Hey guys, today's video is going to be all about how to pick a rental property. So this video is going to be for somebody who has never bought a rental property before and doesn't really know what to look for, or somebody who has maybe bought a bad rental property that's not profiting well, and this can maybe help you in purchasing your next one. So the most important thing when it comes to real estate is a saying that we've heard for a very long time, and that's going to be location, location, location. So location is going to be the very first thing that you should be focused on. So basically there are going to be a lot of different pockets in your town, some areas that are meant for rental properties or better for rental properties, and some areas that are going to be mainly people owning their homes. So if you're not familiar with your area, it's going to be very important to kind of help figure out these different pockets and find the pockets that are going to be a lot more renter friendly. So a good way to do this is going to be to just hop on to Zillow.com and click on the rental tab, and then just look at all of the different rentals that are available in your city. And this can kind of show you if there's going to be a lot of dots in certain areas showing rental listings. Those are obviously going to be the much more popular areas to have a rental property, and areas that are a little bit more sparse with rental listings available, those areas probably aren't going to be as good to buy a rental property in. So you can kind of hone in on the areas that have a lot more rental listings available, and this can give you a good idea of where you should be looking in terms of locating your first rental property. Now, the next most important thing is going to be the purchase price to the rental price ratio. So a good rule of thumb and a quick easy math that you can do on the streets that I like to use is going to be that your rental price needs to be at least 1% of your purchase price. More is better, or if you're just a little bit under, that's okay too, but you want 1% to be your minimum. So for example, if you're buying a $100,000 house, you want it to rent out for around $1,000. $200,000 house, you want it to rent for around $2,000. It's just a good rule of thumb to ensure that your profits are going to be worthwhile. If you start getting under 1%, generally your payments are going to be too high and your rental income a little bit too low, and it just kind of squashes the purpose of having a rental property in the first place because pretty much all of your profits are gone. A lot of people like to use square footage as a reference. So they say I'd like to get $1 per square foot. So for example, if you have a 1,200 square foot house, they want to get $1,200. But to me, square footage really doesn't have anything to do with profits, because if you have a 1,200 square foot house that you're renting for $1,200, but you paid $300,000 for it, obviously that's not a good rental property. So to me, square footage, that's just kind of like a silly rule of thumb to go by. Going purchase price versus rental income, that's really the numbers that you should be focused on. And I will say, generally, the more expensive house you get, the harder it is to get the 1% rule. It's not an equal sliding scale. Like as you go up in price, the rental price equally goes up dollar by dollar. Generally, the more expensive you get, the harder it is to get that 1%. So if you have a $300,000 house, you may be only getting about $2,200 a month or something along those lines. So that kind of leads into my next thing about purchase price, is that I think that the middle priced homes, the middle grade homes, are pretty much going to be the best rental properties for a number of reasons. So for example, if you're looking at super cheap houses, a lot of times you find that the rental numbers look pretty good for whatever reason. You know, they rent a little bit higher than 1%. So you're like, oh man, that's turning a pretty good profit. But you have to keep in mind the quality of tenant that's going to be in there. Higher profits is not always better if the quality of tenant is going to be lower, because there could be things like late rent payments, evictions, no rent payments, things of that nature, and those are just a headache and can really make you want to not buy more rental properties in the future if they're too hard to manage. So I kind of like to stay away from the super low quality rental properties. And then on the flip side, once you get to the more expensive properties, like I said, the sliding scale is not quite the same. So if you're overpaying for a house, that's not going to rent for what you need it to rent for. So the middle grade is what we're looking for. So you're going to get a pretty good quality tenant, and you're also going to get the good rental ratio. And a good trick to try and figure out the areas that are going to have this 1% rule is to just pop onto Zillow, hone in on those little pockets that you looked at before, finding the location that has good rental activity. And if you click on a rental listing and you see what it's rented for, so say the property is rented for $1,700, you click on that rental listing. If you scroll down, you can see the price history of the property, and you can see what the owner purchased it for. So if you see that the owner purchased it for $155,000 and it's renting for $1,700 a month, obviously we've hit more than our 1% rule. So you might see that those properties in there are a good area to be looking in because they're going to be able to hit the 1% rule. Okay, so the next item on the list to be on the lookout for is to find a house with updated big ticket items. So if you're not careful, there are some big expenses in a house that can really wipe out your profits for the year or maybe years to come. So it's very important to make sure big ticket items are taken care of. And these include things like a roof, which can be anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. An HVAC system, which is an air conditioning system, that can be anywhere from $6,000 to $7,000. Dated electrical or wiring, if you've got a 1950s, 1960s home that hasn't been rewired or has a super dated electrical panel, that could be a few $1,000s. If you've got something with foundation issues, that's generally like the kiss of death on a home. Resale on a property that has foundation issues is just really tough. So if you do see something that has foundation problems, generally I stay away unless it's something that really doesn't seem like a big deal and seems like it should be okay with resale down the line. But just make sure that a lot of the big ticket items are taken care of, or if they're not taken care of, ask for them when you make an offer. You can make an offer saying, hey, we'll offer you this amount, but please put a new roof on it. And a lot of times you can work something like that out. Obviously, newer houses are going to be a lot easier to maintain, but of course they're going to be more expensive. So if you can find good new construction homes in your area that are going to rent for the 1% rule, that's a great way to go. But a lot of times that's not really attainable in a lot of areas. But obviously the newer the house is, most likely the less maintenance you're going to have. So just keep that in mind when you're checking properties out. And there's a couple of other smaller items that you need to be on the lookout for. One of these things is going to be HOA dues. So you need to make sure that there's not super crazy high HOA dues that are going to be wiping out your profits, because HOA dues are an additional fee on top of your mortgage. So this is going to be for the homeowners association. Generally, it's an amount given to you for the year. So say it's $1,500 a year, I just divide that by 12, which would be $125, and then add that on to what your monthly payment would be so that you can see what your profits are and if they're still worthwhile. Make sure that you're buying a home, if it does have an HOA, that the HOA, the price is relative to what they're offering. If they're charging you an arm and a leg for HOA dues and they're not upkeeping anything, you know, there's no community pool, there's no exterior maintenance, there's no insurance or things of that nature, it might not be worthwhile. If you've got something that's $125 a year, generally that's fine, not a big deal, and it's usually pretty good because it helps maintain the appearance of the homes surrounding you, which helps keep property values up. So another small thing to keep in mind is going to be lawn maintenance, because a lot of times this cost gets overlooked. So generally as a landlord, I like to be in charge of the lawn maintenance, because a lot of times when you hand that responsibility over to the tenants, they just don't care and they won't have it done. So they're gonna let your lawn get overgrown, shrubs are gonna get overgrown, everything is just gonna be overgrown and it's gonna be ugly and it's gonna negatively impact the value of your home. So it's really good to just stay in charge of that. You can keep it on a schedule, getting mowed every 2 weeks, but keep in mind that it could be anywhere from $40 to $80 to get the yard mowed depending on how big the yard is. So $40 to $80, I mean, that could potentially be adding $160 a month onto your payment and reducing your profits. So if you're adding HOA and lawn maintenance and all of that stuff on top of your monthly payment, you may not have good profit. So just keep that in mind, because lawn maintenance can be an expensive cost if you're not careful. Something that I've done in the past is we had a house for rent for $1,600, or we offered it for $1,650 if they wanted us to include the lawn care, which they agreed to the $1,650, which was great. We kind of had a feeling that they would, and that kind of helps alleviate some of the costs to us. You know, I believe it costed us $40 every time we mowed the lawn, so that kind of helps cover half of the month's worth of lawn care at least. And then another good thing to pay attention to is the house tenant proof? So like I said, tenants generally don't care too much about the property. It's a short-term place for them. They don't have to pay for repairs and things like that. So generally they don't care too much. So just make sure it's tenant proof. For example, is there carpet everywhere in the home that every time a tenant leaves, you're gonna have to replace the carpet for thousands of dollars? Is there a septic tank? Septic tank requires certain things to not be put down the toilets or down the drains and things like that. So if you have a tenant and you tell them not to put these things down, generally they don't listen and they could clog your septic tank and you have to get it pumped and just taken care of and extra added costs and just things like that. So just make sure that the property is pretty much tenant proof, has good flooring, good durable countertops, things of that nature. That's gonna be really easy when there's a turnover, that you don't have to pay for a ton to fix it up when a new tenant is coming in. Alright you guys, that's all I have for you in this video. I hope that helps give you a good idea of the big things to be looking for when you're on the hunt for a rental property. If you've got any more questions of things that are good or not good for a rental property, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Talk to you later.